to be able to do a podcast with a future thought leader and someone who's going to change the game. Whether you think it or not, Danny, I believe you are. Beliefs are really important. I've read some of your book because I thought it's a topic close to my heart, and we're going to be able to deep dive a lot of the things that we've had talked about, and how I've seen things work at Royal Caribbean, actually. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode. And this one's a biggie, to be fair. We're getting quite a few of our guests wanting to come back on and have a little chat, but this is somebody I reached out to because there's a new book out. To be able to do a podcast with a future thought leader and someone who's going to change the game. Whether you think it or not, Danny, I believe you are. Beliefs are really important. I've read some of your book. Because I thought it's a topic close to my heart, and we're going to be able to deep dive a lot of the things that we've had talked about, and how I've seen things work at Royal Caribbean, actually, regarding this, which is really powerful. But every interaction, and this is the introduction to the podcast, every interaction I've ever had with you has enlightened something for me, has changed something for me, and has made me become better. And I think in a world where we only have 5-minute conversations, if you could say that about somebody, thank you, that is a testament to who you are, Danny.
Oh, bless you. That's got me right in the feels, Cuddy.
That's what I do. And
You get me in the feels.
I get you right in the feels, because I think it's important for people to know, whether it's on LinkedIn or whether it's in person or maybe on Facebook, whatever. When you see something and I'm like, I know that guy. I am so happy to say that I know that guy. I'm so happy, and you're a name dropper for me now. So my first question for the podcast is, how many times do you talk about me and say I know him?
Oh, sometimes I don't stop talking about you.
Just kidding. So welcome to the Mind Management Mentors podcast. Mind, it can be managed, and this gentleman knows a hell of a lot about the mind, psychology, and coaching and leadership. And I like I say, it's an absolute pleasure on. Danny, introduce yourself. Tell us who you are and why you're here.
So lovely to see you again, Cuddy. I'm here because it's always a pleasure chatting to you. It just so happens there is a book plug out there. I have to be careful how I say that. Book plug out there. But yeah, we've met each other a few times. My name's Danny Wareham. I'm an organizational psychologist, and I specialize in social dynamics, how do people relate to each other, and personality, what makes you you, particularly the dark triad of narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellism. The quick and dirty, too long didn't read of that is happy bees make tasty honey. If we can create the environment, if we have the right leadership, the right support, then performance is a side effect of that. And that's what I help organizations and individuals do, is understand what's that environment, what are the behaviors that help success.
And I think it's so good to talk about that. This is not, and correct me because I know I'm going to say it wrong, this is not Higgs and Brackett or...
Do you mean Myers-Briggs?
That's the one.
Are you talking about personality?
It's not Myers-Briggs. It's not DISC.
No.
It's not DISC. Because I used to, oh God, the few things that we'll put that to the side. But this is not Myers-Briggs. They are Higgs and Boson. I either call it Higgs and Boson or Hinge and Brackett. One of those two, which were a comedy act from many years
They're probably just as accurate. But no, probably a better word for personality is individual differences. Yeah. So what makes you you? We've always been fascinated with personality, and I do talk about this in the book. There's a whole section on personality, because it's important to understand what makes you you. Why do you react in certain ways? How are you kind of wired? And because we've always had a fascination with how do we relate to each other, ultimately we're wired for safety and conformity. Yeah. So being able to spot what do we have in similarity and what is different means that we've looked to models like horoscopes and Myers-Briggs and DISC and so on to try and bring some typography in terms of what type of person am I to the matter. But To think that you can be distilled, all of your complexity, all of your nuance, all of your intelligence can be distilled down to a couple of primary colours.
I was never sold on it.
Nah,
There
no,
was a
we
few
are more
things that I
complex.
was, yeah, I was never sold on it. And there was, to be fair, there was a few things that, but I was always read, which was tits and teeth out there in the front. We can make it work, but then there was no details from me whatsoever.
Mhm,
And I actually do zone out when I'm talking to analyticals. To be fair, it crushes my soul. So
mhm.
I couldn't disagree with Disc that much. But I did always try and learn that I have got driver in me. I have got the. I try to be more analytical now, but it does crush my soul because I am out there with painting pretty pictures and saying this is what we're going to do.
We we each flex. We might have some preferences and tendencies, but
Yeah.
we each flex. You're a rainbow. You're all of them. You might be, for example, you might be somebody who's much better in the spur of the moment, flexible, unplanned, and do everything at the last minute. That's when you're at your best in a crisis. But if you become a parent, for example, and you've got to get little Jimmy to the basketball and little Sarah to the football, then you can be structured and routined and on time. It just might take more effort, more mental load. The categorizing people, so you are this color, or you're a clownfish, or whatever it might be useful, but you have to recognize that it's not really grounded in science, so it's not evidence driven, and also it depends. You might be super analytical when you're at work, and you might be very laissez-faire and completely different when you're at home.
Absolutely. So you are, it was the psychology part of what you do, and it was organizational psychology, wasn't it?
Yeah, I make work not suck. That's what organizational psychologists do.
So we are going to be talking about climate. We're going to be talking about culture,
Mhm.
because I think there's a distinction, and you talk about it in the book as well, the difference between climate and culture. We're going to talk about the labels that people put on certain business structures, because the bit that I took away from the book that I really liked was there's no such thing as a toxic workplace. There might just be someone's version of they don't align with the values. And you talked about, a lot of people say that working for X is a toxic workplace. Well, no, you would argue the fact, well, no, they've set the values, they've set the credence of what we're going to follow, and then he sticks to it. And
Mhm.
some people will love that because there's no gray area. So you're going to have a lot of people like, no, I want that. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll work 17 hours a day, whatever. But
yeah.
that's not the definition of a toxic workplace, is it?
No, no, and as you said that, there's no toxic workplaces. I heard all those people unsubscribe from the channel. Hopefully, they've stuck around a bit to listen. But the phrase that I use in the book is that an environment, a work environment, it's an ecosystem, and an ecosystem can't be toxic to everything in it any more than a tree is toxic to everything in the forest. Where toxicity comes in is I said a moment ago, we're wired for safety, we're wired for conformity. We want to know that we're going to fit in. So we form a kind of psychological contract between people that says, this is what you owe me. This is what is the agreement between us. And it's often implicit, it's not written. So if your organization says we're a fast paced, dynamic, work hard, play hard culture, and the values that are espoused are all around pound of flesh. You're going to work hard, you're going to be managed by objective. Then I can say that doesn't float my boat, and I won't apply. But there are other people that go, actually, yeah, I quite like that. I don't mind the work hard, grind culture, and I find that energizing. The challenge is when what we promise and what we live is different. When you have an organization that says, we're a family, or we're caring, or we put the customer at the heart of everything we do, or we're innovative, or whatever they say they are, and then you get in and on a cold, wet Tuesday, as we'd say in Stoke-on-Trent, what's the reality really like? And things like, I use an example of HR. A lot of HR people get into HR because they care about people. They want to create safe, people-led workplaces. So this is the psychological contract. This is what I signed up for. then the reality is actually most of the role is more bureaucratic risk management policies. So now you've got an incongruency between what you said you're about and what the day is really like. And that can become toxic because that is now also incongruent with my values. And this is why you see such high levels of stress and burnout in HR practitioners.
Yeah.
The same thing happens in teaching. The same thing happens in the NHS. The same thing, what you think the job is about, because it's an implied psychological contract. And the reality of I've only got 45 seconds with each patient, that then drives this is not what I signed up for. And that can become toxic.
So now and that's something we had to do years ago, and I remember this from a fascinating book. But for me personally, managing expectations is something I have to do on a daily basis, and I find that the lower my expectations are, the more I'm surprised by how fabulous everything is.
So have you got low expectations for this conversation?
I have low expectations for everybody around me, but I've got high expectations of
Okay.
myself to perform the way that I want it to be with like podcasts and however I do.
Yeah, nice
And
save. Nice
that
save.
was yeah, but that was from the chimp paradox because I was constantly stressed, upset, absolutely miserable, blaming the whole world for everything that was going wrong. I was like, no, it was my expectations that I would believe that somebody would do what I would do. And I was like, well, there's an unwritten law that you've created in your own mind, and you're not going to get that met. So
Yeah.
we need to take that one to the side. But that psychological safety, the psychological safety is part of Maslow's emotional needs and the pyramid that we follow. And psychological safety is right at the biggest thing, the biggest core need that we have. And if I'm not using the right terms, please correct me because I know that you are far more literate than I am. But that psychological need for safety is the core understanding and number one need of most people.
Yes. However, safety is subjective to each individual as well.
Yeah.
So, for example, to go back to your example of if you're at your best under pressure, last minute, do everything at the 11th hour, then actually the deadline gives you psychological safety. I'm more comfortable doing that. Whereas somebody else that's maybe more structured and more planning and I don't want to say more organized because that makes it sound like it's a pejorative, but they might need a certain amount of reassurance. So have I planned enough? Or have I done X, Y, and Z to give them psychological safety? So the way I describe psychological safety in the book is it's a bit like saying you're not funny or you're not good looking or
Whoa, stop the buses. What is that a personal attack, Danny?
so I decide whether you're funny. It's a relational thing, which is why some people find some comedians funny and not others. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
I
And
wouldn't
for
go for the beauty thing. I've got a face for radio. I'll give you that. But the
the
funny,
the same is also for the other side. So you're not ugly. Okay. But the point is, it's a relational phenomenon. I decide based on my subjective perception of you whether you're good looking, ugly, funny, etc. And psychological safety is the same. You can't say, "Oh, it's psychologically safe here. I've got an open office. You can bring any problems." That's not how psychological safety is created because I don't create that. The person, it's a relational thing. The person on the other side determines whether it's safe or not, and they will determine it based on their default wiring, so their individual differences, but also their coping mechanisms, their learned experiences and biases. All of those things determine whether what they will or won't find safe. In the same way, you don't determine whether I'm safe or not, or whether I'm funny, or whether I'm good looking.
so
We're not trying to create non-toxic cultures or safe cultures because those are futile endeavors. What we can do is be more transparent about what's life really like, what's the expectations, and then how do you consistently live up to those expectations.
so what you're saying is you're better off selling the Tuesday wet morning than the Friday night when we're leaving work.
Sell the reality. Because if you were to say to somebody, if you work for me, you're going to get berated and shouted at, and you're going to sleep in the office, and it's going to be 18-hour days, you'd be at X. You'd be at Twitter. Yeah. Because I can then determine, is that for me? Because I might find that energizing rather than not so much, than abusive. So yeah, do you walk your talk? And At the risk of kind of going over the same point and labouring the same point, if you look at the standard sort of talent attraction process for a business, you sell the business based on the highlights. So we're an award-winning, fast-moving, dynamic organization. All of our people are in a family, and we create products that change customers' lives. And they may all be true statements once. It was that award you won last November, etc. But we attract people based on this dream. We then go through the onboarding process, and the very first thing we do is say, congratulations on your job. Here's the employee handbook that tells you all the way we can sack you. Right? And
Would
then
you
you go
remove
in,
you're removing the safety part straight away?
yeah, and then you go into work, and your security access isn't ready yet because it takes 48 hours, and you haven't got an access pass. You've got to wear a different coloured lanyard. So the reality, we'll all accept that. We don't expect our IT to be set up on day one. But if you'd have said that at the start, congratulations on coming. This is what a normal Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday looks like. When you join, it's going to take us 2 days to get your laptop. But what we'll do is we'll arrange for you to sit with a new team, or we'll show you around and teach you the unwritten rules of the place. But because you're setting the expectation, you're far more likely to have a better relationship between people than, look at me in my vest. Oh yeah, you only see that every so often.
So basically, we are talking about managing expectations from day one.
Yeah.
We'll actually give you.
Walk
Do you
your
know
talk.
what?
Walk your talk. That's it. Just
Yeah.
walk your
So
talk.
now that's right, and I always throw back to the biggest corporation I worked with, which was Royal Caribbean, and I remember going through certain things like an introduction before we even applied for Royal Caribbean, all those kind of things, and they were quite clearly showing, look, this is where you're sleeping.
Yeah.
You are going to be sharing a bunk bed with somebody else. That's the size of the cabin. This is the hours that you're working. You are signed for 10 hours a day, but there's no overtime, and you get occasional time off in the ports of call. So we all knew what we were signing up for. The amount of times people like work told us, I'm like, yeah, you were, because we did the exact same trading. But now, you're absolutely right. You're managing the expectation. Now, that's the hard part. What we're going to show you is, you're actually going to go and travel the world. You're going to travel this, you're going to travel this, and this is where you get the money, and this is what you get to do. So I have to say, and I do praise Royal Caribbean quite a lot, even though I left after COVID and things like that, that corporations, I think, do have a better grasp for this.
They've often been burned. How many people, Royal Caribbean, it would be easy to say as a talent attraction process, come and see the world. We're dealing with, there's 4,000 people on our new biggest ships. You meet all these new customers and new faces, and you wake up in a new destination every day, and isn't it amazing? But like you say, the reality is you're sleeping in bunk beds. It's just one thing on top of another.
Hey!
Yeah. You're not actually permitted to mingle with the customers at all, only whilst you're working. Yes, you might be waking up in a new port every day, but actually you're on deck scrubbing duty or kitchen cleaning duty, so don't think that you're going to go out there and be looking at the Sistine Chapel. So how long would you stay in that job if your perception, whether you were told it or not, if your perception of the role is, I get to wake up in a new port and see all these people and blah, 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 but the reality is very different.
13
And that,
years.
yeah, and that's why culture is important. Culture's not, fun. We're waking up in a new port every day. It's what's the behaviors that are going to help us be successful. And you're more likely to get the behaviors that help you be successful if they weren't sold on an unintentional lie in the first place.
Yeah. So you're already so businesses starting the culture before they even get into the position, because like, look, this is the culture, this is the expectation. Now, the book Constellation is all about leadership reimagined, and the constellation is about what happens when the leader's not in the room, and how you have got many case studies for this is how it works, and that's what we're going to talk about now. I know I've talked about a slight part of the book that I wanted to have a deep dive with, because I was like, that is absolutely right. I loved it.
Culture is the important bit, because ultimately what I'm saying in the book and in the research, and I'll come back to how the research started, but the broad strokes are, can culture be the leader? So it's important to understand what culture is, rather than it's just a nice place to work, and we've got puppies in the office and beanbag furniture and pizzas and everybody likes each other, and You know, that's not what culture is. Culture is what's the psychological contract we've agreed to, and what behaviors does that then normalize and encourage. Because if it's normalizing behaviors that don't support the organization's goal, then it's going to blow your organization off track.
Yeah.
So who decides how you behave when there isn't a leader in the room? Well, it's those unwritten norms. It's how we get things done around here. Is the kind of cliched phrase. And how it came about was when I started my master's at university. It surprised me that we don't have a definition for what a leader is. Academics don't agree on what defines leadership. So we went through hundreds of different kind of theories, all of which didn't start until sort of 1860. We first started studying leadership. And the leadership doesn't happen in a vacuum. So at the time you had lots of great men, steam-powered tycoons. So as a result, we got this kind of pyramid view of one guy on the top telling people what to do in a very mechanized organization, like Henry Ford's production lines, for example.
Yeah.
The leadership studies have then evolved with the times that are going on, and we've gone through sort of production lines and then war. And today we're a bit more socialized, so there's more about diversity and inclusion. So we're starting to see leadership theories around things like authentic leadership and servant leadership and distributed leadership. But ultimately, the thing that kind of the common thread that connects all of these theories, there's three of them. One is that leader is always a person, which sounds odd when you say it like that, but a leader is in all these theories, a leader is a person. The second is the leader sets the direction. So where are we heading, or what's the vision, or what's the goal? And the third is that the leader has a disproportionate amount of influence on what are the behaviors, how do we get things done, what's the culture. So how Constellation came about was if people understood the goal and the direction, and people understood those unwritten rules of how do we do things around here, then do you need a leader as a person at all? And that was kind of the starting point of what is it that influences my behavior in a group? Is it somebody, usually a man, shouting orders down or telling me where to go or patting me on the back because they're not in the room most of the time? Or is it the norms of this is what we're here to achieve? How can I contribute towards that? So can culture be the leader? So that's how it came about. It was why don't we have a definition of leadership? Leadership has grown up with industry. Is it too hierarchical and structured, especially given how complex and nuanced the world is? I mean, if you want to solve the argument between globalization and populism or global warming or pandemics, it's unlikely you're going to find all of the skills needed to fix those problems in one man or one woman. So that's what it was about.
What's the definition of authentic leadership then? How would that be defined?
You're trying to get the controversial sound bites today, Cuddy, aren't you?
I think that's a good word, though. Authentic leadership is somebody being who they are, and even if they're a bit of an arsehole, they have to still go out and be an arsehole, because that's authenticity.
It is, and I don't really agree with authenticity for two reasons. One is slightly more philosophical. So you're authentic now, talking to me.
Yeah.
And you'll be authentic when you're out with your mates on a Friday night, and you'll be authentic when you're with the family on a Saturday.
No, I'm not. I'm very rarely authentic. my wife genuinely says, "Shut up, just don't speak."
Yeah, but you're just being you. You're just being authentic.
Yeah,
in fact, she doesn't like it.
I do that with a family.
But my point is the language that you use, your appetite for change or risk, all those things kind of flex, even though you're authentic in all three things, in all three contexts. So for me, authenticity is a bit like trust. It's not a fixed, this is who I am all the time. And people that insist on authenticity tend to be either I'm just living to my values, which is a whole other kettle of fish we'll talk about in a bit, I'm sure, or it's an excuse to be a bit of an arsehole. Take it or leave it, I'm a bit blunt. Well, you also don't lead in a vacuum. And understanding how you relate to others and being diplomatic and considerate of other people, does that mean you're being inauthentic if you're thinking about the words that you carry before you speak? So for me, authentic leadership is it's the word authentic that it seems to be a catch-all word for people that just want an excuse to be a bit more direct than usual, or yeah.
There's all, I think you're not wrong. And because if, well, let's talk about values, because if something comes up, because we talked about values,
Yeah.
and it's funny because when I'd said my values to somebody else, and went, well, but is integrity a value?
Hmm.
And I'm like, trying to be as integral as possible with
Yeah.
certain things.
Yeah.
But if something arose, I'd probably put that to the side and go and do. But you talked about John Amici with that integrity move. That was genuinely an integrity move. That was amazing for John Amici, because we talked about his basketball and deciding to stay where he was. But what happens to people when integrity starts against them? So you're talking about values as, is that something we aspire to be, or is that something that we are?
So it's a genuinely a good question. I do touch on it in the book because there's two reasons. One is values are not virtues. They're not always good. They can even be at odds with other values that you share or that an organization shares. So, for example, if you had a value of honesty, how could that be bad? But then if your partner says, how do I look in this dress? And they look like a sack of spuds, and you don't say something. Or if somebody is about to go into a job interview with a big piece of spinach in their teeth, and you don't say anything because you're being nice, is that good or bad? Do you stick to your honesty and go, no, you look like a sack of spuds, babe, and damage your relationship?
Does that not
whilst you decide on it as well, I'll take another one. So I was brought up, and I hint at this in the book, I was brought up to always be dependable. So there's nothing you can't do. There's nothing you can't learn. Try everything. The exact phrase was, when you close your eyes, that's all you've got to depend on in this world. In hindsight, my mother was trying to be helpful. She was trying to say, go be a go-getter, go and try something else. Don't be afraid to try anything. Don't be afraid to fail. Be dependable. But it also means that I don't ask for help. I find it really hard to ask for help. Is that a good value or not? Well, it depends. If you need help, it suddenly becomes it's a bit of a bad value to have. So values are not virtues. The second thing is they're often aspirational, especially in an organizational context. If an organization has a value of customer obsessed or integrity or whatever, I know they're not that. That's what they're hoping to drive for. They're hoping for that. And in the book, there's a lot of different examples, but Boeing have values of trust, safety and quality, and always do the right thing. Those three are their values, and they're still on their walls in Seattle today, in the Renton factory today. These are the same walls that built planes that dropped out of the sky and killed 367 people. So for me, values are not virtues, and they're not words on a wall. They should be lived, not laminated.
That's obviously key takeaway. They should be lived, not laminated. And the amount of businesses that I've walked into and I've seen the values, and then you walk into a room for a business meeting, and I'm like, I don't even think they know what that is. There's not a chance, because I've not experienced that in any of the experience of me walking through a business.
I went to a prospect a few weeks ago, and they're a high precision engineering company. They make parts for high stress, high tolerance areas like submarines and so on. And they are looking to build a 100% quality program. So the things that they manufacture need to be 100% right for the customer. Because if there's any deficit, people die. Fantastic. That's what you say you're about. We're about precision. So going to reception, the water machine's empty. You know, meet the MD. We go into a huge oak table filled boardroom with wires everywhere. Just no electronics. They're obviously there so you can plug into various things, but everything is a mess. It's just spaghetti on the table. There is a health and safety. There's obviously a manufacturing plant. There's a health and safety at work Act 1974, which you're required to display. That's all tatty and dog-eared around the edge. So what you say you're about, we're about quality and precision and lives depend on us. Fantastic. Culture leaves evidence. Let's have a look what the evidence is. And the odd bits of a dog-eared poster or a water machine not working aren't necessarily bad things in of themselves or on their own. But when you start to see sort of patterns of behaviors, you can see that the values you espouse are not the values you live.
It's not one part of that was precision. So what's the difference between a value and a virtue then?
So virtues are good, aren't they? They're tied to religion. You have your seven virtues, and supposedly they are immutably good all the time. Whereas values are contextual. You know, trust is contextual. I have a best friend who I could call at 3 o'clock in the morning, and he would drop everything that he's doing, drive the 50 miles away that we live between us to come and help me with my broken down car and get me out of trouble. I will not lend him money. I do not trust him to pay me back. So trust, like authenticity, it's not this fixed, you have my trust or you don't. And values are the same. It's not honesty or customer obsession or integrity. It's contextual, and sometimes you might need to flex that honesty to protect the relationship. You might have to not give the customer everything they think they want because it will put you out of business. Or it means that your employees have got to work extra hours and take time away from their families to put this customer thing right because we'd always do what the customer wants. So values are contextual, they're subjective and contextual. What you really want is, what are we here to achieve? What's that North Star vision? And then what are the behaviors that help support that? Because a value of customer obsession might mean something completely different in a sales channel, to a customer service channel, to a back office team, to an IT team, etc. What you really mean is, what do you want me to do? When this happens, what do you want me to do? Lived, not laminated.
Lived, not laminated. Love it. So we've talked about the culture, we've talked about the values, lived, not laminated, 100%. Realistically, how many businesses do you think are lived, not laminated? Be honest. Or could you give an example of a business that is lived, not laminated?
So my hope for the book, and I'm sorry to make it sound like I'm peering, but my hope for the book is that people realize that they need to identify where is it we're heading. There's a lot, in my experience, there's a lot of organizations that don't know that. They don't know the difference they want to make in the world, the legacy they want to leave. They don't have a vision. They know what they do and they know how they do it, but they don't necessarily have that aspirational where are we heading. As a result, the things that then happen in their business around what values and behaviors should we have, should we invest in this social media strategy or should we go into this market, these artifacts aren't aligned to anything. So we just end up doing things that we think are right, that feel good. We want happy employees. We want beanbag furniture. We want, nice clean offices. Whereas if you had that direction, if you saw how important it is to set that cultural wind in the right direction, which then aligns what are the behaviors and the values, which then helps you decide, should I invest in that social media strategy or this social media strategy or leave social media completely? That's what I hope is that North Star. And because so few companies have that nailed down, often the values fall into very predictable selection. There was a study, I think it was Gartner in 2022, found that 80% of the FTSE 250 companies had 80% of the FTSE 250 companies, 80% of their values were identical. So they all had 80% of those 80 companies had honesty. They had customer at the heart. They had something around ethical trading or ethical beliefs or do the right thing. The worst, without getting on a soapbox, is when they form an acronym because you've shoehorned them in to a certain word. Again, it's not the words, it's what's the behaviors. And values aren't inherently bad, but if they can become weaponized if they're not lived, if they're not used. I say in the book, I've seen one where a value of speed, and the idea was that this company would stun their customers with how quickly they resolved issues, how quickly they got the deliveries. They just operate in speed. But the reality of the day job is sometimes it takes an hour to get your password unlocked, or the security gates didn't open super fast as you get into the building. So then you see these passive aggressive comments of, I thought we operated with speed around here. And suddenly your well-intentioned value becomes a weapon to be used.
Right. So I love you hooked me right in on the passive aggressive, because I have that quality, because congruence is a big thing for me. And you're right. I mean, you could not say it any better. Lived, not laminated. You're 100% right. And I know that we're both in a networking group that's got the values that we always try and adhere to and things like that. Even though when you put in new ideas for innovation and traditions, I'm like, well, we're not trying innovation then, are we?
Yeah, and again, that is in part what's the North Star of that organization.
Yeah.
And this particular organization has it has a sort of schizophrenic split. So you have a major blue chip that passes, £26.4 billion worth of business between its members, that has a whole suite of goals in itself about influencing countries' economies and rebuilding economies and so on. But Bill the Plasterer didn't sign up for that. So you have a secondary sort of lower level set of why are we here? And because that North Star isn't clear across the entire organization, people bring their own North Star. I'm here for more business, or I'm here for the social aspect, or I'm here because I want to see you succeed. So we bring our own intent and motive. And where constellation leadership works really well is in the military. They have a thing called mission command, which is basically they have lots of vertical leadership and planning before and after. But because the intent and the motive, the why are we here and what we're trying to achieve, and what did you mean by that and what are the behaviours, because that is understood by all of the group members, they don't have to keep asking for permission or checking when something changes in the plan. So it allows them to react and be dynamic. In your networking group, if that intent and the motive isn't provided or isn't clear, people bring their own. And that happens in a lot of organizations. It's why you have I regularly see discussions between departments that think, sales are all dodgy and they'll sell anything to anyone. And then the sales team think that the customer service team have got no commercial acumen and they don't know how to run a business. And whether those are true or not, you get these tribal beliefs and this sort of protectionism that's driven by limiting beliefs. And it's purely because you're both contributing to the same thing. Sales need to ring the till and give a great experience so that customer service can deal with the after sales, which means when they come round for their subscription renewal, it's an easier conversation for the sales. It's an ecosystem orientated around that cliched North Star. In the absence of that North Star, we all bring our own agendas and our own motives.
I love it. It's such for any, you've just got to sit down with Danny, because the understanding and the research you've done into things is absolutely fantastic. And I mean, you have got the book out, which is exactly why we got you on the podcast, because I think people need to know about it. Because I love how you're referencing it all as because it is constellation and what's in the stars and like the North Star. And it's funny because I've used the analogy when I'm talking with business leaders, when I do get the chance to work with them. I'm like, leadership is a simple way to look at it is you're in the crow's nest.
Mm-hmm.
You're in the crow's nest. You have to plot the direction. And that's what constellation is about. So if you're plotting the direction, you need to plot the goal. You need to plot the values, which are lived, not laminated. And then you let the worker bees, as you would say, buzz around.
That's a really eloquent, simple version. I mean,
Sorry, I've dumbed it down, haven't I? Because you're very smart.
No, you've not dumbed it down. You've made it accessible, and dumbed it down. So, constellation leadership, everybody is a star in their own right.
Yes.
How do you create the right group of stars to form a consensus and achieve a goal? We were talking earlier on about the standard kind of talent attraction and onboarding approach.
Yeah.
Before you go to market to look for the talent, our approach tends to be, Dave has left, go and get me Dave's job description. That's got 10 items on that Dave used to do. Go and find me another Dave-shaped person. And the hiring manager's measure of success is who fills those 10 criteria the best. Now, nothing wrong with that, but what you're inadvertently doing is creating guardrails in your business that say this is the job that this person does. Now, it doesn't matter that they've got lots of other skills. In fact, a Deloitte study from 2023 found that about 85% of the skills you have as a person are not used in your day job. So for me, I'm a really good chef. No client has ever asked me to cook. I used to be a web designer. Nobody's ever asked me to do it. So I've got all these skills, I've got all these tools on my van outside, and I'm not permitted to use them in my role. Now, what Constellation Leadership does is it says, here's what we're trying to achieve. How can you contribute towards it?
Yes.
Not what's your job. And it may mean that sometimes you're not the right person to be stepping up to the plate. So the constellation flexes and allows whoever is the most suitable person. The group has the psychological safety and the culture and the behaviors and the trust so that anybody can step up at any time, because we're all heading towards that one goal, that one North Star. And that's what it's about. It's about, at its simplest, it's inclusion. How can you be you? That's it.
I love that. I'd work for that business. And it's funny because it's, do you know what? This is something we when we had good leaders, and one of the good leaders that I used to work with, I learned a lot from him. He was called Darren Budden, and I'm getting him on the podcast actually, because he still works at Royal Caribbean. So we at Royal Caribbean, we used to have changer. We were all on different times on the ship. So we would have work with two different hotel directors, two different captains, and stuff like that. And I got really good leadership coaching from certain people that were like, one of the things, there was a book out of Stay Above the Line or something like that. Always above the line. I know you'll know it, and I know you'll recognize it, but it was just get it done at any cost, whatever it is. And they used to use examples of, somebody's lorry breaking down, and he got a friend to take the lorry, literally technically stole it, but he got the business and came back to his van, and it was just basically do whatever you need to get done. And I used to always go with the teams that I worked with and go, right, what's your skill set? Tell me what your skill set is, because you're on this, but you don't no, I'd much rather be doing this, this, and this. So I was actually that manager and leader. I was like, what do you like? I'd prefer you be on something that you like, because I know full well that there'll be other people that are like, oh, I don't mind doing gangways, and I'd rather do the game shows at the night time. Some people don't ever put me in a game show. I'd rather do the gangway at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I was told, I was explaining that's a much more powerful way. Then you get the different overhead come in and go, no, everyone's got to be able to do everything. Everyone's got to be able to do this, 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 and this. And I was just like, oh my God. So I get, Danny, because it's the only way that I can share it and add value is I understand
it makes sense. It makes sense. And you do add value. The kind of common challenges that you have though is often we've kind of hired very similar types of people, usually similar to ourselves. So when there's a diverse range of tasks that need doing, actually everybody likes doing the gangways, or everybody because we create almost like groupthink in terms of what attracts us. So inclusion's important because inclusion creates diversity. So there's no point hiring different people and different experiences if you're going to clip their wings and say, this is your job description, this is your job role. You've got to have the environment that allows you to use those tools. And if you don't have that, you're inadvertently creating that kind of boys club. And that might not be all boys, it might not be all straight white men, but it will be, if Royal Caribbean, other cruise operators are available, but if they went out with we are a party in the ocean, and we only want Jack the lads who want to come out and get drunk on tax-free vodka and have party times, right? Nothing wrong with that, but you can't be surprised when you then have certain types of people that are attracted to that dream that you've sold. And then when you have a crisis in the ocean, nobody knows what to do because I only came along for the crack. So inclusion it has to be intentionally created. Say, what is it that we're trying to achieve? What are the behaviors, the approaches, the preferences, the tendencies that are going to help us achieve that? And this is where companies come unstuck. is that they don't know where they're heading and they don't hire and create inclusive spaces because we're wired for conformity and safety. So it takes effort. But if you're not intentionally creating places of inclusion, then you're unintentionally creating places of exclusion.
I just love it. I absolutely love it. So what's
Is that a soundbite? Is it? Yeah,
No,
you're having that one.
the app does it for me, to be fair. But what's the future of leadership? You know, for a connected age,
Yeah.
what's the future? How do we move forward with a new North Star?
So hopefully people are going to tear this book apart because it's got two purposes. One is nobody had studied leaderless leadership in this way before, which I was really surprised about because there's so many examples in the real world. You know, who's the leader of your family? Well, it depends. You know, if it's directions, it might be my partner because I've got no sense of direction. If the Wi-Fi goes down, it might be one of the kids because I've got no good with that either. So leadership, the mantle of leadership flexes in the real world. So it was odd that it had not been studied. So because it's primary data and it's primary research, the first purpose of the book is for academics and practitioners to go and pull it apart and go, I can build on this, or this isn't quite right, and test it and build their own research on it. And the second is to highlight that this is happening in the real world. There are some really successful businesses and organizations that are already using this approach. And it's not because it's woo-woo, woke, inclusive, you know, let's create a commune and everybody do what they want. That's not what
That's
it
a
is.
cult.
Yeah. But you have organizations from, you know, the biggest earning esports team in the world use this approach. Every single army and armed services in the world use this approach in certain situations. We have a company in Manchester that have a revolutionary way of running scrum, agile scrums that follows this approach, and they outperform. They're the fastest growing SaaS company 4 years in a row. So there are commercial competitive advantages to working in this way. And my hope for the book is academics pull it apart and build on it, but leadership and management people have a look at maybe the way we've been working in the past has been shackled to great man theory and production lines, and the world has changed. We don't have production lines anymore. We have matrixed, complex, inclusive environments, hopefully, where you could have 3 or 4 different line managers and every day flexes. So that the rigidity and the security that those models give might not be suitable. So the future is inclusion, and this is another way of looking at leadership rather than it being somebody at the top of a pyramid.
Because that's yeah, you're not wrong, because there's value in everybody, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
And do we really find the value in everybody?
Often those unwritten rules, they tell you to behave a certain way and you don't even realize. So you might go into a corporate world and the group speak that happens. So you get phrases like, you know, let's circle back to that, or let's double click into that and talk about it a bit more. You would never use that phraseology in any other context.
I do it all the time with my wife. I'm like, let's circle back to that.
Just,
I don't have
just
an
to wind her
answer.
up.
Let's circle back.
Just look for a greener way forward. But the point is the language that you use in certain groups, the behaviors you have in certain groups, the way you dress in certain groups might be different. But those are inadvertently creating exclusive places. Because if this is how you're supposed to behave, this is the silent social pressure, then all the things that make you tits and teeth and all the things that brings that, you're not permitted to use, even though that's at your best. And there are other people, you know, introverts are amazing at spotting risks. They're amazing at seeing the things that kind of more extroverted people don't see. Absolutely. They're better listeners. They're more reflective. Yet how many introverts have to pretend to be extroverts at work? Because if they don't speak up, nobody invites them into the party. So you have this masking and personas that we create because you don't really have inclusion. And if you don't really have inclusion, how can I bring all the tools on my van? I'll just stay in my lane. You'll call me a quiet quitter because I'm just doing my job.
Which is literally, oh, do you know, I know we talked about that before we started the podcast. So you know what, let's open that one. Is like, you know, quiet quitting is now, I suppose, in terms of just doing the bare minimum, getting to the end of the shift. We're like, no, that's work. That's what you're paying me to do. You've told me this is what I need to follow and do it. So it's not really even quiet quitting, is it?
In the book, I use an example of Avanti, West Coast, and Virgin, right? And we all know that the level of customer experience and employee experience is very different, even though they're essentially the same company, same people, same train, same station, everything's the same. And I discuss how that North Star changes the behaviours that are acceptable, and that's why it's different. One of the things I don't explore in the book, though, is that a lot of the staff are the same staff, because long tenure on the railway means people will have worked for Virgin and for Avanti. So it's the same person, Steve we'll call him. Steve used to give amazing service on the railway, and today Steve gives crap service on the railway with the same tools, the same regulations, the same everything, same station, same working colleagues around him. So is that Steve's fault? Because I would argue that's not Steve, that's the environment. And leaders don't lead people, leaders lead environments. It's the analogy I use in the book is that we're like farmers. Farmers don't focus on the fruit. Farmers, the plants will do that themselves. What the farmers do is they focus on the mundane stuff, like what's the soil, how often is it watered, how much sunlight's it, the non-exciting, boring day-to-day minutiae that allows the plants to thrive. And for me, leadership's very similar. That how do you create the environment where you can be you, where you can do what you do best, and what you do best might be chaos and creativity and tits and teeth. Other people, what they do best might be reflective and analytical and so on. But if you just create an environment that says only this type of behaviours are tolerated here, you will either get people that are attracted to that environment, so you get very similar people, or you'll get people pretending to be those people, which is stress and burnout and that emotional labour of trying to mask and pretend to be something that you're not.
Yeah.
So lead environments, and that leadership is all about inclusion, and constellation leadership is a way of systemizing inclusion.
Yeah. This is absolutely bang on. Danny, look, the book's there. The book's there. It's available at all good stockists.
Yeah, and some crap ones too.
I wanted a signed copy, but I got it from Amazon.
Okay.
I mean, it's just, and the thing is, when I'm reading the book, you always hear a voice. I'm lucky that I know you, so I'm reading it in your voice.
I got told it sounds like me in a suit, apparently.
No, I remember somebody ages ago saying, oh, because I used to recommend books. I'm like, read that book. And somebody said to me, I remember, oh, I didn't like that book. I thought that the person writing it was really condescending. I'm like, that's your voice. You've never met the person.
Yeah.
I'm like, I said, that's your voice. You're reading that. Yeah. So when I'm reading this, and I know you, I'm reading your voice, and I'm reading your tonality, and I know your dad jokes on a Friday, which are bloody genius on LinkedIn, to be fair. There's a lot of things that you do, and I'm like, oh God, I'm gonna have to start modeling.
The book's like I say, the book has two intentions. One is the academic side, one is the business side. But there's about, I don't know, 35 pages of references in it, in tiny type. I wanted to make sure that the academic research is published, but it can be inaccessible. It's written in academic language and so on. So the book's tone is written in a way that hopefully is a bit more accessible, a bit more real. People can relate to it, but not so much so that it feels a bit woo-woo and a bit idealistic and like, this is an interesting idea, but it's got no grounding in the real world. Yeah. Hopefully this walks the balance between this is how we got here and this is what we think leadership is, and it's kind of trapped us. Here's a potentially new way, and don't take my word for it. Here's some examples of, how it's being used.
Danny, it's been a pleasure.
I know how busy you are.
I know how busy you are, and I know we have good chats and stuff like that. Look, thanks for coming back on the podcast. You are the next Simon Sinek for me. I told you that. More references
than Sinek.
I know, but I did say that, and that I know that how the world see. I've never even read Simon Sinek's books, to be fair, but I know everyone references them how good they are, and I've seen a couple of podcasts with him and stuff like that. But for me to be able to sit here and say, I know Danny Wareham, not even the next what's he called? Simon Sinek. I know Danny Wareham, and that for me is a new guiding light and the constellation of stars that I've met. You're one of them, and I appreciate that, Danny. I mean that sincerely.
Thank you, and I mean that as well. I had some advice before I wrote the book from other authors, and
What?
they
Don't
told
write
me
it.
no, they told me when you publish it, it's like your child going off into the world. You have to,
It's because you've given it away.
yeah. So don't dwell on like reviews and stuff because you'll go mental if you've got bad reviews and so on. What they didn't tell me is the praise that comes from people going, "This is really good" and so on, and it can feel a little bit uncomfortable and icky because I'm not a particularly showy, puffery, peacocky type person. But as long as it resonates with some people, and the argument that I make is that if you have a bad day at work, you take it home. Purposefully engaged people are more likely to put the bins out for the neighbours. Disengaged people are, it ties to things like family breakups, financial problems, domestic violence. My argument is employers rent employees from their families. They have a duty of care to return them in a better condition. And if the book helps people to look at their workplace a little bit differently and create a better society, fantastic. I hope if it just does that for one person, I know it's a cliche, but then mission accomplished.
Amazing. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for being on the Mind Management Mentors podcast. If it's in the mind, it certainly can be managed, especially after speaking to Danny. Leadership is under a new guiding North Star, and that's the power of constellation.
Fingers crossed.
And always, always, always remember that values are learned, not laminated. I did it wrong, didn't I?
Lived.
Lived!
Lived. But you probably
Lived!
should learn them first. Yes.
Lived, not laminated.
You have learned, lived, laminated. Is that the new live, laugh, love? You're gonna have that above the fireplace.
Absolute pleasure. If you've enjoyed this podcast, like and subscribe, share it with your friends, tell your friends about where the answers are. I'm a big believer in this podcast about creating solutions and answers for people. And this is one of them under leadership, which is we're talking about culture as well. We're always trying to work in culture, and I call myself the Chief Officer of Happiness now. That's my new LinkedIn, is the Chief Officer of Happiness, because it makes a difference. And I think the whole sentiment of you're renting them from their families, you've got to get them back. That's because also people bring their home life to work sometimes. So, oh my God, that warms my cockles, to be fair. And on that, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much, Danny. And we'll see you in the next episode of the Mind Mentors podcast.
Thank you, Cuddy.